All right, welcome back, everyone. So, still here in Washington, and have quite a few good stories to go over. Actually, some big updates. Some stuff you have folks might not like, so hear me out. Yeah, someone's mentioning Emma Rowan, the executive order delayed. That's right. The DNI is delaying the report. I'll be getting into that tonight. Also, I want to go over some of the new findings on Facebook. Facebook looking like it violated the law. I'll be going deeper into some of this. From Knoxide, thanks for support, about the report on foreign threats during the 2020 election being delayed, which I'll be explaining a bit more in a bit. Does it just mean the IC portion, Intelligence Committee portion of the report won't be finished? Won't other agencies still file the reports by Friday? That actually should be the case. Now, that's actually important context on this. It's only the DNI office that's saying it's been delayed. They're not really detailing why they've delayed it. There's concerns that maybe they have deep state type folks in there, of course. The intelligence community has not had a good track record on that, of course. But at the same time, that's a good point that, of course, the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security were also required to file reports by Friday, and we haven't heard anything from them on this yet. I will be keeping you all updated on it. It's important to know, though, that I'll be going in depth into it, but while they're saying that they've delayed the report on the DNI side, the Director of National Intelligence side, they are saying that they're putting it together. And so they have now confirmed that they're doing this. Maybe they forgot. I don't know. We'll have to find out. Real quick, also, Rudy Naris, thank you also. Hello, Josh. Now the ODNI's announced report will be submitted after the December 18th deadline. Does this have an adverse effect on the executive order? We'll have to see. If anything, maybe delaying actions it could have taken, we'll have to see. Now, before I go too deep into the questions, let me go over some of the news first. Now, I wanted to go first into what's happening with Facebook, because Zuckerberg may have violated the law in a pretty significant manner. The manner of about $500 million significant. Now, check out the link I have in the live chat, right? Now, it says here, money from Facebook Zuckerberg used to undermine election, violate the law. This is according to a new report that just came out. Right, speaking of interference in the elections, right? Now, hundreds of millions of dollars from Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg were used to violate election laws, according to a new report. Hundreds of millions of dollars violating election laws. Now, this is from the Amistad Project of the Thomas More Society, which is a national constitutional litigation organization. They released a 39-page report. Those of you interested in reading it, I'll put the link in the live chat. It's a 39-page report. It alleges that Zuckerberg's $500 million given to election officials was used to treat voters unequally and to improperly influence the election for Democratic president candidate Joe Biden. Now, the bulk of the funds went to the Center for Tech and Civic Life, a nonprofit started by former managers and staff at the New Organization Institute, which is a progressive nonprofit. According to the report, the nonprofit, the one he gave the money to, earlier this year, quote, began sending agents into states to recruit certain Democrat strongholds to prepare grants requesting monies from it. Now, for example, the center gave $100,000 to Corey Mason, the mayor of Racine, Wisconsin, to recruit 4 other cities to develop a plan and request a large grant from it. Those 5 cities submitted such a plan in June and received $6.3 million to implement it. Why is the mayor in Wisconsin receiving $100,000 through a progressive organization designed around what appears to be biased election meddling? Now, it says here, that kind of privatization of elections undermines, quote, the Help America Vote Act, which is this act, of course, the Help America Vote Act, which requires state election plans to be submitted to federal officials and approved, and requires respect for equal protection by making all resources available equally to all voters. In other words, you can't discriminate Democrat versus Republican voters if you do something like this. It says, quote, the provision of Zuckerberg CTCL funds allowed these Democrat strongholds to spend roughly $47 per voter compared to $4 to $7 per voter in traditionally Republican areas of the state. Moreover, this recruiting of targeted jurisdictions for specific government action and funding runs contrary to legislative election plans and invites government to play favorites in the election process. We see involvement now of Zuckerberg, involvement now of at least one mayor, and also money used that violated the law. Now they've violating the law on the election. A mayor is involved with this. Will they invalidate the election on this? Who knows, right? Now, Mason's spokesperson did not respond to a request for comment, nor did Facebook spokesperson, nor CTLC's media office. Epoch Times reached out to all of them. They did not respond to it. Now, here's a quote, though, from Phil Klein, director of the Amistad Project, during a press conference in Virginia. He said, quote, "This effectively is a shadow government running our elections." And who is the shadow government in this? Well, Facebook playing a big part of it, nonprofit playing a big part of it, and also at least one mayor playing a part of it. It continues, quote, "Government has the core responsibility of managing elections. We don't put out elections for bid. We don't have elections brought to you by Coca-Cola or, TM Facebook, right? It is government's job to manage elections, and it must do so without a thumb on the scale." Now, the project said the main foundations funding the efforts include the Democracy Fund, New Venture Fund, Skoll Foundation, and Knight Foundation. Other nonprofits deemed key to distributing the money, besides CTCL, were named as the Center for Electronic Innovation Research, the Center for Civic Design, the National Vote at Home Institute. Vote at Home Institute, what is that, mail-in ballots? The Center for Secure and Modern Elections. Secure and Modern Elections, that sounds very 2020 to me. And Rock the Vote. Now, none immediately responded to requests for comment. What are we seeing here? Well, according to them, a deep state organization that used donations in an illegal way. Illegal donations, illegal finances through Facebook, through these different organizations, some of which sound very new, putting money into, giving to government officials then using it to do things that are not legal. And what's going to be the response? $500 million in illegal funds. Are these people going to go to jail for it? Is Zuckerberg going to go to jail for this? Is he going to be charged for this? Is anything going to be done for this? Well, if there's any integrity left in the election system, then yes. If there's not, then no. We'll have to see. Real quick, Deidre Berger, thank you. Let's see. What is crazy is why private funding was used at all when there was plenty of governmental money not touched. Was it bribery? Was the government money somehow hidden? That's a good question. Government money is often not used very well. This is a fact. And of course, different states oftentimes use illicit methods to, launder federal funds through actual projects and things like this. When they ask for federal funds, they might way overcharge on things, and they're like part of the shareholders with it, or the family members are owners of the company tied to it, and so on. And they'll use this to sometimes stuff their own pockets with federal money. This happens so often, it's absolutely disturbing. Real quick, Haran Musa, I thought Epoch Times was from Toronto for some reason. We actually do have a Toronto office, but no, we're New York based. Let's see here, the Stork 2. Joshua, if you were Trump, how would you proceed from now on till January the 20th? Frankly, and I'll be getting into different parts of this, frankly, I think the only thing Trump can do at this point that's really going to happen. Now, we've talked before about the Insurrection Act, right? Let's just be blunt. We talked before about the Insurrection Act. We see now the DNI itself is even delaying this report on foreign government involvement in our elections. And will that get to Trump before January 6th, really when things are somewhat finalized? Now, he technically has until January 20th, but until January 6th, things are going to be difficult, right? Now, if you're Trump and you're needing to deal with election fraud, let's imagine this isn't even Trump. Let's imagine this is any normal election. You're not dealing with Trump. You have large-scale evidence of China being involved with election interference. which we verified. You can watch the documentary I put together. We have large-scale evidence of $500 million through Zuckerberg going through governments and nonprofit organizations that was illegal funding, according to this report. You have large-scale evidence of different incidents in different states using illegal methods to change election laws, using illegal methods to bypass the Constitution and so on to do these types of things. Now, normally, incidents like this would be called election fraud. Incidents like this would be called crimes. Incidents like this would need to be dealt with through normal legal processes. And so why aren't they? Well, here's the problem with election fraud when you're dealing with it, is that the people in charge, the people who hold the levers of the law, the people who can litigate, the people who can bring government action, are the people in these states that have gotten into power through these election systems. It just so happens that it's most of these Democrat states that have, for example, these dominion systems. It's most of these Democrat states that have had these issues take place. And are these people who, are in charge of, using the law to go after these things going to do it? If doing so means basically going after them, right? If doing so means going after themselves, is that going to happen? Right? This is the issue you have with election fraud, is that the levers of government are the people holding levers of government are themselves the ones who will be implicated with it. And are the people holding levers of government going to do something to possibly incriminate themselves? Can they plead the fifth when it comes to this? Probably not, right? And they're going to block it. Different judges are going to obstruct it. Internal people within the political infrastructure is going to obstruct it. Every single person ideologically aligned within any layer of this who has any skin in the game is going to do everything they can to not cooperate, to delay it, to throw it out, to refuse to look at the evidence. That's just how it is, right? How do you deal with a situation like this, right? Historically, the only way you could really deal with an incident like this would be through the Insurrection Act. And we can go back to the origin of this, which was founding fathers. Remember Aaron Burr, after he got in a duel with Alexander Hamilton and shot and killed him, right? American history. He wanted to go invade the Western states and establish, Burrtopia, essentially. Right? He wanted to go conquer the Western states from Spain and establish his own country. Jefferson caught wind of that. And Jefferson was looking at, okay, how do I go and stop Burr from trying to establish his own country in the Western states? Now, what happened with that, right? Well, they went and argued through Congress, got passed, because they said the Constitution doesn't allow Jefferson, for example, to raise a standing army to stop Aaron Burr, to stop Aaron Burr from going and conquering the Western states. So what do? They go to Congress, they get it passed, and they allow this Insurrection Act when there's insurrection within the country. Now, if you actually read the necessity, right, the requirements for instituting that, it's not very high. It's actually very easy for a president to bring that about. And keep in mind, we're talking Insurrection Act. It doesn't mean like Trump establishing a military dictatorship. Remember that during the Civil Rights Movement, the Insurrection Act was called on, for example, to bring in the military to guard black students going to college. It's been used for very minor things. It doesn't have to be like, crossing the Rubicon type thing, right? This doesn't have to be some kind of large-scale Trump's, the dictator now type thing. No, it can be using the Insurrection Act to go after these corrupt individuals who are openly violating the law in many, many, many ways, one of which we just discussed with Zuckerberg, these nonprofits, and at least one mayor. This is illegal, right? Are they going to face the law for this? Is the election going to have the integrity restored to it through this? What's going to happen with this? We can look, for example, what happened with the Dominion machines, where they had a 68% error rate. And keep in mind, the allowed legal error rate is 0.008 or 6. I think 0.008, I want to say. Less than 1%, less than 0.001%, as a matter of fact. And it was 68%. sometimes even higher in some places. That's illegal. Legally, the people who validated the election in those areas violated the law by doing so. How do you deal with this, right? Well, again, that was the purpose of the Insurrection Act. You have 0.0008. That is the legally allowed limit. How do you have that be the legally allowed limit? And we had, geez, I don't know how many times greater than that, 68%, right? This should not be allowed to happen. According to our laws, this should not be allowed to happen. How was it, right? How is it that the laws are allowed to be violated like this and nothing's going to be done about it? Again, there's a precedent for this, a precedent set by Thomas Jefferson, one of the founding fathers of the United States, which was the Insurrection Act. Now, I mentioned before that Trump could possibly use this DNI, Director of National Intelligence, assessment on foreign involvement in the elections, foreign interference in the elections is a legal ground to do this. But based on the evidence he already has, even without that, he actually does already have the legal ground to do it based on, frankly, openly evidence of people violating the law, right? He could do it if he wanted to. And frankly, I don't see any other way to do something like this. You can't go through the normal courts. You can't rely on local officials. You can't rely on the governmental institutions, frankly, because they've been subverted, because there's an insurrection, because there's a soft coup. And they're saying in that report, this is a shadow government operating in the United States, openly violating election laws to rig an election. How do you have people openly violating election laws to the amount of $500 million? And this is just a tiny, tiny, tiny piece of the whole picture. If you want to see a broader picture of this, look at that documentary I put together. That documentary itself, hour and a half worth of evidence, straight evidence, one after the next. How were we able to put that together at Epoch Times within 3 weeks? And within 3 weeks, and the Director of National Intelligence can't put it together in 45 days, right? Anyways, let me go over a couple more questions and I'll go into the next part of this. Let's see. Tommy Savoy, is China waiting for us to be distracted with a civil war to attack? Possibly. I don't think the United States would actually have a civil war, though. Frankly, I don't think it would work like that. If, for example, there was a standing military, for example, under the Insurrection Act, do you think that your average leftist, maybe Antifa being the strongest they have, would be willing to stand up against the U.S. military in any way? Probably not, right? I don't think America will have a civil war, but you should understand what the nature of war is in the 21st century. War does not necessarily have to be bombs and guns and so on. It can be methods used to subvert systems and change the direction of those systems. China has been waging war against the United States through unconventional means. Actually, folks, you might be interested. I did an interview today with Steve Bannon on War Room Pandemic. I was actually on his show today. And we're going to be publishing afterwards. I sat down with him and we had a very long interview. We'll be publishing the whole thing. And we actually discuss Chinese political warfare and how this is manifesting in our current political climate. I think you folks will be very interested in that interview, and we should have it published this coming week. What day is it? This next week, sorry. Let's see here. Kevin Moffat. How much circumstantial evidence does Trump need to make it evidence? When will a judge take U.S., the electors, seriously? Well, look, it's not even circumstantial evidence at this point. There's extensive circumstantial evidence, and there's extensive direct evidence that illegal things were done, right? Extensive evidence, illegal things were done. And again, this is a pretty big deal. Trump can act on this if he wanted to. Trump right now could act on this if he wanted to. I'll answer one more and then I'll go into the next story on this. Anhaf Habib, thank you for the support. Pence must not cuck on January 6th. That's actually a big point. Pence, when it comes to, remember right now we have dueling electors. We have dueling electors. 7 different states put in dueling electors, meaning that media declaring that Biden won the Electoral College vote are lying to you. Right now we have dueling electors. To say that, and remember, 7 states also put in electors for Trump, meaning that Trump, you could argue Trump won the election based on that same analysis. Stating either of these would not be true, right? Jennifer Caddo, she's asking, are the dueling electors legal? Yes, they are. There has been cases of this before, but never in the past have there been so many states doing it. We have a precedent for this. This is the first in history. There's no precedent for it. There's never been this many states that have had dueling electors. It is a legal process. Basically, it's going to have to go to the to the Senate, and you're going to have each one brought up. You're going to have debates on it, and really, you're going to have Pence, Vice President Mike Pence, being the deciding vote on some of this, and so Pence is going to have to do quite a bit for this. Pence is going to have to stand by Trump on this. And frankly, I think he is going to stand by Trump on this. Knowing Pence, that he hasn't shown any signs, for example, of backing off of this. Yeah, Bill Favit. Josh, if this blatant fraud which took place in this election is not being addressed properly, do you see any point in voting in any other election in the future? Well, let's be clear. If blatant fraud is not addressed, if Zuckerberg giving $500 million, possibly violating the laws allowed, if, for example, using systems that can have a 68% error rate and that are visibly flipping votes from one candidate to the other in favor of the local political interests of the local politicians who brought those systems in. If this is allowed to happen, if this is not prosecuted, if it's not stopped, if it's not investigated, this will become the standard of doing things. We will have a banana republic. We're going to have a criminal-run political system if this is allowed to stand. Because what's going to happen? Openly being able to violate the law to alter the outcome of an election will be the allowed way of doing things. And if we don't have normal enforced standards and laws on the elections, then how can we have any type of integrity in the elections? This is the end. If this is not addressed, the system through which America chooses its public officials is done with. The system we have of government is done with if this is not addressed. I know people think it's extreme talking about the Insurrection Act, but frankly, what's at stake is our system of government. What's at stake is our system of government. Let's see here. Hey, Jimmy Ling, always appreciate the support. What about the silent hand behind the scenes, i.e. George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and Obama? Actually, there's some new evidence on Clinton being involved in a new UBS scandal. There's some other stuff as well. George Soros, actually, I deeply exposed some of the networks with Soros tied to what happened with this election, including these purchases when it came to, for example, Dominion. There is evidence on this, and you can watch the documentary I did laying out a lot of that evidence with Soros. He said these big fish need to be held accountable besides those known participants. Yeah, real quick, though. Let's see. Yeah, Anhaf Habib, I didn't read the second part of your question. He said you're talking about Pence must not cuck on January 6th. That is what it all boils down to with regard to legal avenues. The military options, meanwhile, have sufficient just cause to be implemented, courtesy of CCP meddling. And that's a good point. Trump actually still does have a very strong legal avenue to winning this. And I've spoken with some people who are close to the legal teams, and they're the people I spoke to, 100% confident that Trump is going to win it through that. You can also watch the interview I published just a bit ago, about an hour before I published this, or we started the live today, with an Arizona representative detailing how that whole thing will work with the dueling electors and with Pence. He's also actually very confident that Trump actually could win the Electoral College vote through the dueling electors. To the extent that Trump has a stronger chance at winning through the dueling electors than Biden does, frankly. If that does not work, he does have the other option, which would be the Insurrection Act. And we'll have to see how that goes. Maybe after January 6th, after the Electoral College vote, after the dueling electors go through, the DNI report will be in and they can go from there, but we'll have to see how that works. He could technically do it even without the DNI report. On that note, though, let me explain what's happening with the DNI report, which ties to this 2018 executive order I've been talking about so much. Now, folks, check out the link I have in the live chat. It says here, DNI says, this is the Director of National Intelligence, DNI says intelligence will not meet Trump's December 18 deadline to report foreign threats during election. It says the Office of the Director of National Intelligence announced late Wednesday that DNI John Ratcliffe has been notified by the intelligence community that they will not be meeting the December 18 deadline set by a presidential executive order to report on foreign threats during the November election. The intelligence community informed John Ratcliffe, the Director of National Intelligence, that they will not get him that report by the deadline on December 18th under a presidential order, right? It says here, this is according to Amanda Schock, ODNI Director of Strategic Communications, in an announcement. It says, quote, this afternoon, the DNI was notified by career intelligence officials that the intelligence community will not meet the December 18 deadline set by executive order and Congress to submit the IC, intelligence community's, classified assessment on foreign threats to the 2020 elections. Now, those of you interested, it was in a tweet that they sent us out. I'll post the link to that in the live chat. It says here, the IC, the intelligence community again, has received relevant reporting since the election, and a number of agencies have not finished coordinating on the product. The DNI is committed to providing this report to our customers expeditiously. Now, so they're saying they're committed to having the report finished soon. We'll have to see if that pulls through. Now, back on this, Trump's executive order in 2018 states that the Director of National Intelligence shall deliver an assessment, quote, of any information indicating that a foreign government or any person acting as an agent of or on behalf of a foreign government has acted with the intent or purpose of interfering in that election. Those of you who watched my documentary, you've seen the significant evidence we presented on that. I don't know why the DNI is taking so long. Maybe they're looking at information we didn't see. But even based on the information that's public, you can find significant evidence of China having been involved with this. Lynn Wood and Sidney Powell have been submitting reports and bringing in witnesses talking about foreign interference, including through, for example, Pakistan and other countries. Pakistan, Iran, Venezuela, and China, and others. The fact that the ODNI is delaying this, we can expect one of two things. Either they're delaying it because these are deep state hacks, or two, they're delaying it because they found something very significant and they're putting it together still. Or maybe they're delaying it because they forgot to put it together or something, right? Now, White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany previously said on Tuesday that she was not yet aware of any report issued by DNI John Ratcliffe's office about such a matter. The executive order signed on September 12, 2018 directs the U.S. government to impose automatic sanctions on foreign nations, individuals, and entities who are found to be involved in trying to interfere in U.S. elections. You hear that? Under that executive order, it directs the U.S. government to impose automatic sanctions on foreign nations, individuals, and entities found to be involved in trying to interfere in U.S. elections, which could possibly mean Dominion, which could mean China, which could mean Iran, which could mean Pakistan, which could mean Venezuela, which could mean possibly, we'll have to see what happened with the finances, possibly even Facebook and Twitter and these big tech companies. Multinational corporations have been doing these kinds of things. Some people are asking if I have a link to my documentary. Let me get that real quick because I didn't paste it in today. I forgot about it. Real quick, let me get that. So again, we have alternate channels. YouTube is, of course, deleting videos on this stuff. You can check out the UMaker link here, which is our new platform. We made this platform. It's a partner of Epoch Times. Also check us out on Patreon. I have the video published, free documentary, entire thing free to watch. It's about an hour and a half long. I pasted both links in the live chat. Please check it out. And I'm going to put the Patreon link is pinned, so those of you coming in can check it out. So anyways, interesting stuff happening, right? Now let me answer a couple questions and we'll go deeper into it. This is from Sparky Hill. Attention, Josh. Catherine Herridge, CBS, just reported that Ratcliffe says China, Russia, and Iran interfered in the 2020 election. Wow. Okay. Okay. Breaking news. Let me check this real quick. Because if this is the case, folks, the game is on. Let me check real quick. Oh man, is it happening? It does seem to be the case. Let me verify it real quick and then I'll jump into it. Oh. Okay, it's happening. All right. Well, okay, breaking news as we're doing this update right now. I'll post in, Gateway Pundit has it. It's in a tweet, but they actually have the video clip. Those of you watching on live chat, check the live chat, putting the link in now. Those of you coming after this published, after this video publishes, check out the live chat. I'll paste it in there. Now, this is Gateway Pundit, and they have the video, sure enough, talking about this from CBS. It says, this is from the tweet. CBS senior news correspondent, CBS Herridge, reports that DNI Ratcliffe, quote, has told CBS News that there was foreign election interference by China, Iran, and Russia in November of this year. More to come. Now, that's a big deal. China, Russia, and Iran confirm now that they've interfered in the election. Under the 2018 executive order, this is from the DNI, meaning the people required now, right? DNI required to send this report to Trump. The head of it is now announcing confirmed election interference, China, Iran, Russia. And under that 2018 executive order, Trump can now act on that. First off, also now you have automatic sanctions going against China, Iran, and Russia under that 2018 executive order. That's a big deal, right? All right. So here we are, folks. History in the making. Let's see what happens with this, right? Now I'll go deeper into the Epoch Times story, just detailing some of how this works. This is not just against countries, right? Again, it means automatic sanctions. Automatic, meaning this does not have to go through anything. It's automatic. Done. China, Russia, Iran sanctions. It's also going to look at not only nations, but individuals and entities who have been involved in trying to interfere in U.S. elections, meaning that if they were able to, okay, this is me analyzing, this is pure analysis. If they were able to interfere in the elections, this means they would have had to have gotten through institutions or systems in the United States to do so. The big question we're going to have is what institutions, which institutions did they interfere through, right? Which institutions did they interfere through? Was it Facebook ads? Was it, for example, Dominion machines? Was it, for example, through organizations, nonprofits, individuals? Possibly. And what does that mean when it comes to the election? What does it mean as well when it comes to, for example, even these mayors who have very cozy ties to the Chinese Communist Party? What does it mean when these nonprofits have very cozy ties to the Chinese Communist Party? Think tanks have very cozy ties to the Chinese Communist Party. You know, I've talked about this before. You know, you have this report now coming out. What is it? Over 2 million Chinese Communist Party members in the United States. That doesn't mean spies per se, but it's illegal for them to immigrate to the United States. And one of the questions that they still ask, if you want to get a green card or citizenship here, is, for example, and who paid for the riots? That's a good point too. Is, for example, are you or have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? Over 2 million people have lied on that. This means. Now, interesting times ahead, right? Let me go deeper into this. December 18, So now it's happening, folks. December 18 marks 45 days after the November 3rd election, general election, where, according to the executive order, the DNI is expected to deliver a report regarding, quote, to the maximum extent ascertainable, whether any interference attempts took place and the nature of such interference, methods used, and who was involved and authorized such efforts. Now that the DNI is confirming China, Russia, and Iran interfered in our elections, they're now going to be looking at any interference attempts that took place, the nature of such interference, methods they used, and most importantly, my favorite part, who was involved and authorized such efforts. Now, that's going to be very, very big. I can tell you that. Now, the order stipulates that after the assessment is delivered, the Attorney General and the Secretary of Homeland Security would have another 45 days to evaluate the report and make a determination. If the election interference is found by the two departments, if election interference is found by the two departments, the Secretary of Homeland Security, right, and the Attorney General, if they find there was election interference, sanctions would be imposed to restrict the property of the persons involved. Now, quote, the order provided a list of possible sanctions and stated that, quote, any recommended sanctions shall be appropriately calibrated to the scope of the foreign interference identified. Now, we don't have details on this yet beyond China, Russia, and Iran having been involved. We don't have any details yet, but folks, you can watch my documentary I've been talking so much about, because frankly, we found evidence of this ourselves using publicly available information. Significant evidence of this ourselves. This is happening. I can tell you also, I've spoken with individuals who are close to some of the legal teams who have been mentioning some of these things as well. And so this does seem to be fairly significant. Now let's see here. Trump, in the order declared a national emergency. Remember also, we're still in a state of national emergency from that order. We are still, as we speak, in a national emergency because of that order. Yeah, someone mentions too. Yeah, Krebs. Remember Krebs, the guy who's supposed to be watching for this stuff, said there was no evidence. It was the most secure election in history. Talk about a career-ending statement, right? Now, it says Trump, in the order, declared a national emergency. We're still under that national emergency to deal with the threat of election interference, and stated that, quote, the ability of persons located in whole or insubstantial part outside the United States to interfere in or undermine public confidence in the United States elections, including through the unauthorized accessing of elections and campaign infrastructure, or the covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation. That makes it very broad, right? Not just direct interference, unauthorized accessing of election and campaign infrastructure, but also covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation. That's a big deal. And you know why? Which country framed the narrative using disinformation on which these lockdowns are based? Which country established the model and used disinformation to promote this model of mask mandates and lockdowns that were used by different government officials across the United States to alter election laws? Which country did that? That was China. The Chinese Communist Party, when this virus outbreak started, told the world that it handled this thing better than anybody else. It lied to the world. There was verified evidence of it lying. This is why the United States withdrew finance up and then fully withdrew from the World Health Organization, because it was determined that they were lying about these things. There was clear trails of evidence showing how they lied about it, and the CCP was using the WHO to mislead the world. The idea that lockdowns are a viable way to deal with this virus, the idea that mask mandates are a viable way to deal with this virus, are based on the lies told by the Chinese Communist Party and different officials believing those lies. This is not saying I don't believe the virus is real. Frankly, I think it had a very big impact in China. But the Chinese Communist Party knowingly allowed this virus to spread knowingly, right? They restricted travel within China, but still allowed travel outside of China. Different U.S. officials in the United States then used this, whether this was collusion or not, then used this as an excuse to change the election laws, bypassing the constitutional standards in place through which you would normally do that, which was the basis of the Texas lawsuit, the fact they did that, and also the basis of a lot of the lawsuits currently going through right now, including the new ones put through by the Trump campaign or the Trump team. Intentionally. Yeah, William Slattery intentionally did this. Yeah, so this is very big. And again, the reason I'm mentioning China and the lockdowns and the model for that and the virus is because there was disinformation and propaganda involved with that. The Chinese Communist Party did that very heavily. And different governors in the United States used that as a framework and a model through which they then changed the rules of our election. Could you say that is the covert distribution of propaganda and disinformation to interfere in our elections? I would say so. And they're saying this, quote, constitutes, in addition to this, that constitutes an unusual and extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States. Well, frankly, I'd say it's very unusual. I don't think we've ever had anything like this happen ever in the history of the world with these crazy lockdowns. And I'd say it's also a very extraordinary threat to the national security and foreign policy of the United States if China, Russia, and Iran were able to subvert our systems and use their networks of subversion and control of institutions like the WHO to do it. And then in addition to this, which organizations were restricting public discussion and public debate based on the disinformation being spread by the Chinese Communist Party? Which organizations were saying that if you tell your friends or family members information that falls outside of the official narrative of the WHO, which was making statements on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party, basically working as their mouthpiece. The reason the US again pulled out of the WHO is because they could not demonstrate independence from the CCP. So the WHO working as a mouthpiece of the CCP. Which organization was telling Americans that if they deviate from the narrative set forth by the WHO that they would be censored? Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, and other social media platforms. And also their so-called fact checkers, and also the big media involved with that. Not saying they're going to be included in this, but frankly, based on the extent and stipulations in this, they could be. Meaning that this is a very, very big thing. The question the question with this is not so much can it be done, but to what extent will Trump decide to use it? Frankly. Oh man, interesting times, huh? Teresa Springer, really appreciate the support. Oh wow. You're asking what happens if President Trump uses the Insurrection Act and or martial law and January 6th Congress votes Biden in? Would the actions taken be reversed by Biden, and would this then jeopardize President Trump? Now, from what I understand, this could go until January 20th. January 20th is the hard deadline for this. Constitution time, right? Constitution time. Technically, even if Trump or Biden refuses to concede, even after the January 6th vote, it could still, from what I understand, based on, I've read different analysis on this based on constitutional law, it could still go to January 20th, even without any of this other crazy stuff happening. And up until January 20th, the final outcome of this is still up in the air. Yes, the Electoral College will be decided on January 6th, but the Electoral College can be overridden based on constitutional law. The way this could play out. The one issue many people have pointed out, though, is while these openings are there in the Constitution, it's actually fairly up for interpretation on how you play it out. And so the way this could actually play out, it could go in many different directions. And frankly, we've never had anything like these lockdowns. We've never had anything like China using all these systems of unrestricted warfare. We've never had, for example, these high-tech institutions colluding, at least on narrative, with this. There's nothing like this in history that we can look to. We've had precedents. In history, there have been cases, for example, of dueling electors. In history, there have been cases, for example, of wide-scale election fraud, 1876, right? Different cases like this. And in those historical cases, which were actually way less severe than what we're seeing now, way lower scale than what we're seeing now, it was actually the candidates typically who lost the Electoral College vote and lost the popular vote who ended up winning through the other methods of recourse, meaning that historical precedent is in Trump's favor on this. But again, the way the laws are worded, they're fairly open for interpretation. But of course, now we have this 2018 executive order, and now the DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Ratcliffe, affirming, at least according to CBS, that China, Russia, and Iran interfered in our elections, and meaning, again, he's the guy submitting this report to Trump, and meaning, again, Trump can then act on all the different stipulations within that executive order based on that now. This is no longer just analysis. This is fact. This is happening, folks. We've never seen anything like this. And it's going to be interesting to watch how this plays out, because we're in uncharted territory right now. This is the reality of it. We're in uncharted territory. But we can say again, based on historical examples, on way fewer incidents than this, way fewer problems than this, people who were in the position that Trump is in right now did win elections. And so I've mentioned before, you've asked if I think Trump has any chance. I said I give him an 80 to 90% chance based on all the information I'm seeing. I'm moving it up to 90% solid chance. Let's see here. Mad Max, always appreciate the support. Joshua, the Democrats must be handcuffed now and can only stand by in their basement and watch. Handcuffs, nice thought. Frankly, it's not just going to. I don't think this is going to be a partisan issue. The corruption we're seeing is bipartisan. How many people have backstabbed Trump? How many people now on the Republican side are showing to have significant corruption? You know, one interesting thing we're seeing through this whole incident is the masks are falling off. People who we thought were reliable and credible are showing to be not reliable or credible. The overplaying of the hands of the media organizations, of Facebook with censorship, of YouTube censoring people like they are in ridiculous ways, you know, even to the extent that, who knows, maybe they'll even pull this video down for discussing this stuff based on the new rules they're putting in place. They're overplaying their hands. And by overplaying their hands, frankly, maybe they're putting all their bets that this was going to turn things around. Maybe they didn't think it was possible any of this could ever happen. They're overplaying their hands, and frankly, by doing so, they may have shot themselves in the foot. And that does seem to be the case now. This is not going to be a partisan, one-party issue of what could possibly happen with this. You're going to see people across party lines, possibly, very likely, based on the information we've seen from some of these public officials as well, being implicated in this as well. And especially when you get into the financial institutions and ties to China, as this Dr. Di Dongsheng noted. And Dr. Di Dongsheng, part of Xi Jinping's brain trust, part of the brain trust of the head of the Chinese Communist Party, announced very proudly and smugly that they were able to control American politics through the banking institutions and the financial institutions. And again, saying they could not control Trump, and noting as well that they did have influence through Hunter Biden in his publicly available, broadcasted, videotaped speech, which we include in our documentary. How, you know, typically when you get into the financial institutions, the old school Republican Party, right? Just talking about party lines, the old school Republican Party pre-Trump was the big business, absolute capitalism, absolute free market side. To the extent that they said, why not trade with China? You know, of course, trade with China, right? Trump actually went against the conventional way the Republican Party worked, which is why you had so many Republicans early on, 2016, 2017, pushing back against him and rebelling against him. And many of them were pushed out of the Republican Party. This is why you have George Bush and the Bush family, you know, siding with Biden and Obama, right ahead of this 2020 election. You're going to see across party lines. This is not going to be a partisan thing, I think. And interesting times we're in. Yeah, in breaking news, what an interesting time for this to come out too while we're doing this broadcast. Let's go into some of the other questions here. Actually, let me finish up some of the stuff detailing this 2018 executive order now, because this is it, folks. This is happening now. Now let's see. I'll continue on that. Now Trump wrote this when it came to that executive order. He said, quote, "Although there has been no evidence of a foreign power altering the outcome or vote tabulation in any United States election, foreign powers have historically sought to exploit America's free and open political system." Now, again, he wrote this before we just found out that China, Russia, and Iran interfered with our elections. All right, he says, quote, "In recent years, the proliferation of digital devices and internet-based communications has created significant vulnerabilities and magnified the scope and intensity of the threat of foreign interference, as illustrated in the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment." And he's playing with them. Trump is good at this. He's good at his judo moves. It's Hegelian dialectics. He's good at using their tactics against them. What was the 2017 Intelligence Community Assessment? That was when the Democrats and the institutions, the DNI at the time, that's when the institutions were saying that Russia interfered with our election. Remember that whole Trump-Russia scandal that went up in smoke, and it turned out the Democratic National Committee and the Clinton campaign actually hired this company through Fusion GPS to recruit a former British spy, who then wrote this Russian disinformation document, the Steele dossier, right? The PP document people talk about, sourced from two Russian individuals, meaning that they spread Russian disinformation to interfere with the election, while claiming Trump used Russian disinformation to interfere with the election. Remember when they did that whole scandal that played out for 4 years and it went up in smoke? Trump is using the assessment on that in order to do this. He's good at this. I'm talking judo, right? Someone throws a punch and you use the momentum of their punch to throw them. Someone tries to strike you and you use their own strike and the momentum of their strike to toss them, right? It's Hegelian dialectic, which is actually, funny enough, one of the foundations of Karl Marx's dialectical materialism. Hegelian, mysticism and stuff like that, going back to the time of Marx, which was at the time the Hegelian dialectic, one of the main ontological theories at the time. Now, Hegelian dialectic, you could break it down like this: when you're talking about subverting a process in motion, taking this judo move, right? Someone throws a punch, you grab their fist and you throw them, using the momentum to basically turn it against them. Using their own methods against them, right? As the Chinese Communist Party has said, strangle you with your own systems. It's this method. Hegelian dialectic is thesis, antithesis, synthesis. The manipulation of a process in motion to alter the synthesis, alter the inevitable outcome of it. Observing these things and seeing how you can change the trajectory of something in motion. It's heading to point A, right? They created it to head to point A. You're changing it to go to point B instead. Trump took this method that was used, funny enough, to take him out, to say that he interfered with Russia and so on, which turned to be a lie. He's using that lie that they put together against them. And he used that to make this 2018 executive order. It's quite clever. Yeah, 4D chess, I think they call it, right? Very, very, very interesting times we're in, folks. Let's go into some of the questions now. All right, let's see here. Net sales booster. Can Zuckerberg be locked up for election interference? I sure hope so. Well, at the very least, he could be seriously sanctioned under this 2018 executive order. We'll have to see with that. And again, maybe he will be arrested. Maybe if again, it does appear, according to the report, that he violated the law. Maybe that is the case. We'll have to see. This is from Mo. Thank you for the donation. Breaking news again. Arizona subpoenas forensic examination of voting machines per OAN. Okay, again, Arizona has subpoenaed the forensic examination of these voting machines. Now, remember again the 68% error rate that happened in Michigan. Arizona now is subpoenaing this forensic examination, meaning this forensic examination may become something happening across different states. They've been pushing for this for a while. Actually, I did see something on this. I forgot to mention it. Yeah, interesting. Real quick, this is from Tay Johnny. Joshua, this country is really, really in the mess done by the Dems. I mentioned it's bipartisan. You have some corrupt Republicans as well, but it is true. Unfortunately, this is technically more partisan leaning towards the Democrats when it comes to what happened. This is true. Yeah. Now you have the whole thing falling to pieces. This is really what we see here. The entire scandal is falling to pieces. Dominion audits, forensic audits taking place. The DNI coming out talking about foreign interference. 2018 executive order directly tied to that, which gives Trump massive powers. Trump has massive powers that he could use through that executive order now, based on this now DNI assessment. Right, it's falling to pieces. It's falling to pieces for the other side. You also have the dueling electors. You also have the legal challenges, not just through the Trump side, but through the Sidney Powell side. You have this whole thing falling to pieces. The number of people who could be implicated in this, when the smoke clears, will be massive if they decide to do it. And you had just about every power player there is come out and play and show every card they had, right? Trump sitting at a poker table. Everybody cheated. Everybody had aces up their sleeves. They put him down. Trump still wins and takes the lot, right? Every single one of them just exposed themselves through this. Every single one of them put everything they had into this, and the whole thing is now falling to pieces. We'll see what happens. I don't want to overstate this, but because again, we've seen the way this has been playing out so far, right? I don't want to. Given the way this has played out so far, who knows what will happen? But every single piece of this is falling apart for the Democrats mainly, and for the Biden campaign, and frankly, for every corrupt individual in this country that has been engaging in these things, and other countries, China, Russia, and Iran, at least. Let's see here, Evan Griffin, first super chat, appreciate it. What in your opinion gives me the confidence that Trump will follow through on the executive order? It's Trump. And Trump has been saying that he's going to not stop fighting. Yeah, even Soros, someone mentioned. If you watch my documentary, I mentioned extensive evidence on Soros being tied to this as well, including to some of the stuff tied to China, meaning that executive order could impact him as well if Trump decides to use it. What in my opinion gives me confidence that Trump will follow through on the executive order? It's my analysis on the character of Trump. Trump was the one who signed this executive order, right? Trump was the one who signed this executive order. He was the one who signed it specifically to be 45 days after the election. He was the one specifically who made it so that this analysis takes place after I mentioned this last night, made sure that this analysis takes place after the Electoral College casts their votes. Why would he do that? As I mentioned before, maybe it's because he wanted to see if it's to root out corruption in the election system, which is its stated purpose. Maybe it's because he wanted to see how corruption would be acted out at every stage of the election, including through the Electoral College vote, right? Regardless of whether or not that was his intention, that will be the effect of this. And we saw, at least in one state, electors from the dueling elector side, from the Republican side, were not allowed to cast their votes in Michigan. Michigan government violated the law by doing that. Oh, wow. 80s Warrior. Really appreciate the support. Here it is first, or here at first. Trump will be president for another 4 years. God bless America. I love your pacing and leading. It keeps me in a trance. Thank you. Have you ever studied NLP? Not technically, right? Obama is a very poor student of Tony Robbins, which Tony Robbins uses NLP, and has for 40 years. What interesting times we're in, folks. All right, I've been going on an hour. There's a lot of questions coming. I'll do two more and I'll call it a night because I've been going full steam, to be honest, and I'm heading back to New York tomorrow night and heading down to Florida after that. I got quite a lot of traveling to do, so yeah, I'll call it a night after this. But see, first, Emaruk Ashima, thank you. Trump should turn the tables and make Biden the one who needs SCOTUS. Supreme Court. Mike Pence should not accept counting fraudulent electoral votes, and I don't think he will. If Biden wants to sue, let him. SCOTUS will say no standing. It's very possible. And Melissa McCall, thank you. Love the documentary. Thank you. Can't wait to see you in the White House. Yeah, thank you, folks. All right, one more. Junk Journal Crafts. You stack a house of cards too high, it will tumble. What's your opinion of whether Pelosi is involved? I'd say pretty high belief that many of the people. Well, I don't want to make accusations I can't back up. I have no evidence that Pelosi was involved. But frankly, you have a lot of people who overplayed their hands, and you're right. You stack a house of cards too high, it will tumble. They overplayed their hands, and now we see the whole thing falling down. All right, folks, I'm going to call it a night, but I always enjoy doing these. Again, I should be able to do another live Q&A tomorrow night. I'm just thinking about my schedule. I should be able to do it, so tune in again tomorrow night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. I will not be doing one Saturday. I need a bit of a break. But again, Sunday through Friday, I will be doing these every day except for Saturday. 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Again, also doing the different interviews you've been seeing. And also, in addition to that, as you've been seeing, doing these broadcasts from the different debates, from the different events across the country, because frankly, most media are not showing these. In fact, YouTube pulled down the video we had of Michael Flynn giving a speech. Epoch Times, NTD, we had videos of Flynn giving a speech at the Stop the Steal rally. YouTube pulled that down. The other media were not there to report it. If we did not record that and have it on other platforms, that would be lost to history. Think about that. History would forget that this ever happened if we hadn't done that. So, again, on this channel as well, I'm putting most of these live broadcasts, most of these news conferences, most of these things that you can't find anywhere else, which is ridiculous. I mean, I wish it wasn't the case, to be honest. But, yeah. Anyways, trying to keep up with all of this. So tune in again. We're going to be you've been seeing, of course, many videos each day, trying to keep up with all this. Be back again tomorrow night at 10:30 p.m. Eastern Time. And folks, as always, please take care of yourselves, stay informed, and stay free. Thank you.